Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I'm your host, Christine, and I'm very excited today to be joined by Kelly Kimple, who is the CEO of Adventures in Good Company. And we have had the privilege of traveling together and really sharing what it's like outside of this conversation of running our businesses and creating space for women in adventure travel. And I'm so excited to bring that conversation actually here in this platform into the podcast today. So thank you so much for being here and welcome, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. We were really lucky to a few years ago now have traveled together to Switzerland.
Mhm.
And it was so fun because I had heard about you so much and people kept saying, do you know who Kelly is? Do you know who Kelly is? Like right in a row, probably like 5 or 6 times in a row. And then I signed up for my adventure for the Adventure Travel World Summit. And I saw your name and I was like, finally, the universe has decided that it's time for us to
Yeah,
meet.
that's so great.
I was so grateful for that experience
Yeah,
and to travel
and
with.
it was fun to meet you beforehand too when we were trying to navigate the railroads and how to get there.
Yeah, it was so good. We landed in the airport and like our first hurdle was finding each other from the airport to the train station, which were connected. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was great. And we got to like go in the middle of the night trying to find our hotel in the pouring
Yes,
rain and
through
like
the rain
coolness.
and yes.
Yeah, so we got to get right into adventures together. But as we start the conversation, I would love to just turn it over to you, Kelly, to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and about Adventures in Good Company.
Thank you. So I am the CEO and owner of Adventures in Good Company. I did not found the company. So the company was founded in 1999 by Marian Marbury. And she based the company on her experience with a nonprofit called Woodswoman. So Woodswoman was the first of its kind to offer outdoor adventure experiences for women led by women. And they had these guide leadership workshops. So Marian actually had a PhD in epidemiology, and she was working for the Minnesota Department of Health, but she started guiding. It was really her passion in her free time, working in the office. And then when they closed their doors in 1999, she bought the mailing list and she reestablished it as Adventures in Good Company. I came into the picture in 2018, right around the 20th anniversary of the company, as a program manager. I've been working in the industry for a few years in the youth travel space. Youth travel, really educational and transformative travel. Um, and I was really interested in just what this would look like for women to do something similar for women, small group travel, active travel for women. And interviewed and was intrigued by it. And at that time, I asked Marian, what's the future of the company? Where do you see it in 5 years? And she was very candid that she was probably going to be selling it. She wasn't quite sure, but she was considering her, exit strategy at that point. She was coming up on 70. Um, so fast forward a little bit to 2020, we closed on the sale of the business in January of 2020, and I took the reins 3 months before the pandemic. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but it was challenging, and yeah, it was very hard. At the time, I really didn't know the industry very well, and I didn't know the people in this industry. So it's funny to hear you say that people had asked if you knew of me and met me, and honestly, I didn't know many people in the industry, so I was just kind of learning as I went. I took over for a very established company, and it's been a privilege. It's been hard, but it's been a privilege to get here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you so much for sharing that. And I think one of the things for me that I have found that's really special, especially in the adventure travel space, and then if you even narrow that down further to the women's travel space,
Mhm.
is I feel like that it feels like a community. And so probably people that knew both of us would recognize that we had a lot of alignment or that there might be ways that we could support
Mhm.
one another or just,
Mhm.
bounce ideas off or have someone else that that's on a similar path. And I think
Mhm.
I always love when someone else I know and trust like sees a synergy between me and somebody else that I'm like, okay, I will take
Mhm.
that on, like good standing and good faith that there's a reason to connect. And
Mhm.
I also think that people can be depending on where you're at, very supportive of trying to find you the next space
Mhm.
to go or
Yes,
the next
yes,
person to turn to. So I
yeah.
have really appreciated
Mhm,
that.
mhm,
Well, you kind of alluded to this, but like so many of the guests on the podcast, you didn't necessarily start by imagining yourself with a career in travel, and um, had a moment where you were really realizing that the job that you had like really gave you a lot of stability and safety, but you didn't really see yourself flourishing in that. And
mhm.
you started looking for change, which you mentioned, but can you share a little bit more about that transition and why you felt it was really important to like lean into that awareness that you weren't in a space that felt so good to you that you wanted to look for something different?
Yeah, yeah. So I was at Colorado State University. I'd been there a little over 6 years, and I liked the people, but just wasn't feeling very passion driven. I didn't know where it would go long term. It was stable. I had two young kids at the time, good benefits, so it was filling all of those needs in terms of a job, but not, filling me up to think about getting excited. And I worked in a very passion driven industry before that, where I was a biologist, a conservation biologist. I moved to Fort Collins to work for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. With it at the time, I considered it to be my dream job. um, a number of things happened in those 3 years. Went through three executive directors. Nonprofit world is, can be volatile. um, Got married, and just kind of took a career change, took a leap of faith to try something new. But yeah, I decided to give my notice. It was really scary at CSU and see what was out there. And I was lucky to find, I don't know if it's Fort Collins, Colorado. We have Colorado State here, and we have the Masters in Tourism program. And I think it does support this industry more so than maybe other areas. And we also have Semester at Sea is based here. So I had two offers around the same time, one with Semester at Sea and one with a nonprofit called No Barriers. I don't really even remember why I chose No Barriers, but I did. And I took that job offer. Doing something really similar to what it is at Adventures in Good Company for a program manager. Um, and it's the program management, organizing trips for youth, and realized during that time that I loved this industry. It was really exciting. I loved being able to support people to have these transformative experiences, especially youth. I had a kind of transformative experience around that same age, late middle school, high school. And I know the impact it can have. But it was a nonprofit and it was pretty volatile again. So someone sent me the posting for Adventures in Good Company, who had gone to Prescott College, and AGC has kind of this history with Prescott College. And I just applied kind of on a whim, like, oh, let's see where this goes. And that led me here into the industry. And it really does feel like a lot of things came together in terms of my a lot of things just lined up. It's providence, it's luck, it's also determination, and continuing to take the lessons in each phase and stage of your life, and also trying to take the time to consider, like, what do I want, which is hard to do as a woman and as a mother, and when you're also just trying to pay the bills and make sure your kids are getting to school and getting fed and staying healthy and all the things.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There's probably a million little parts of that we could pull apart and talk about. But I think the one thing that I kept hearing through the first position you had that moved you to Fort Collins, and then the next is like kind of the volatility of things and working for nonprofits and then working in these different places that have inherent volatility. And then
Mhm,
you mentioned that you applied as a program manager, eventually took over with Adventures in Good Company in 2020. And
mhm,
we all now know that a lot of
mhm.
volatility followed that moment. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, in yourself, do you think that we can talk about some of the specific kind of hurdles and challenges and transitions of like moving from being at the right place at the right time to
Mhm,
take on
mhm.
this role to all of a sudden being at the right place at the wrong time, kind of like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that transition was like for you and what that really felt like to kind of immediately hit a roller coaster that you wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah, yeah, I think, well, I was so excited, in January 2020, it was just like, it was so exciting to be given this opportunity and it was amazing. And I felt supported in that, it was a great team. Marian was still there, consulting and helping. And just looking forward to, I think we had about 100 trips on the schedule for the year, getting to know the partners and the guides more. And then, of course, it was very quick in terms of the world changing so rapidly. And I remember I had hired an attorney prior to owning the company to help me work on some risks and release agreements and booking terms and things just to kind of just what I felt like were helping to protect me in the business going forward. And I remember calling her and talking to her as we were trying to get these agreements in place and thinking about, okay, well, now what do we do with this? Do we want to incorporate some language around COVID and us talking about how, oh, it'll never affect, the United States and our trips in the United States. And then, of course, everything shut down. We all know the story there. And it was really, really challenging. I don't know how, I mean, there were so many tears and so many long days. And I just didn't want to give up before I felt like I even started, right? And I was determined. I think that's one of the things I have is like just a lot of grit and a lot of determination when I start something that I'm going to figure it out and stick with it. So I also had a supportive husband. I still have a supportive husband who had been in the banking industry and he'd done work for the Small Business Administration. And so he helped me connect pretty early on with getting access to some SBA funding, an EIDL loan, and be able to keep things going. Because in all honesty, the business it looked like it was heading towards bankruptcy. There was really just no way around it. It's a small business. It wasn't like I came in with a bunch of capital or investors, right? I invested our own funds into buying the business, and it's an owner carry. So I was, making payments to Marian, and also had payroll to meet, and cash flow was really non-existent. And and I was just refunding and refunding. Oh, it was a lot of money. It was close to $1 million, and still trying to watch the bank account go really low was very scary. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. I really tried not to lay people off and to keep things going. I had a lot of support from the guides who've been guiding with us for a long time, and they believed in the company, and they helped me see that, and they showed up for me and for our travelers to continue to offer trips. We started running trips again that fall in the United States, which was really scary looking back. But our travelers wanted to travel. They trusted us to do so, and we were able to bring things back slowly. And of course, in 2021, we didn't run any international trips. I think maybe we ran one at the end of 2021, and then started to pick up again in 2022. But it was very volatile still. There were a lot of things to contend with and a lot of challenges every day. But we got cash flow going again. I leaned on the loans, but yeah, it was not easy. A lot of tears, a lot of like trying to find help and support where I could. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Although for me, and as you were talking, I was just thinking there's kind of like, different tiers of businesses in the industry. And there's these huge brands that probably have, the support of
Mhm.
attorneys and all this other support built into their business. And then
Mhm.
there's kind of where your business is like at this medium level. And then I'm here at a pretty small level with my business. So while it was really scary for me, I could kind of more easily pull back and get myself into this like
Mhm.
just stagnant state. Like it was easy for me to just
Right,
cancel
right.
my trips and
Mhm.
kind of like shelter.
Yes,
I
yeah.
didn't have as many people relying on me.
Yeah, yeah.
Where I did have people, like I had trips lined up in Guatemala and Peru. I
Mhm.
decided to work with them I ended up creating a t-shirt brand where I sold t-shirts that kind of had empowering messages, and that money was donated to the nonprofits that I would have been traveling to. And
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
was like the only thing I could in that moment think of to support the small amount of people relying on me.
Right,
But
right.
when you think about where you were, it's like you kind of didn't have maybe the excess capital that you could think you might wait it out, figure out how to like maybe cut some people here and there to loosen up funds. Like you were already like both at growth and streamline at the same time.
Yep.
Like it's kind of a
Yep.
spot to be in, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you could speak to that. But that culture and that community of people that was already created were really the things that
Mhm.
like
Yep.
kept you going. And I think I saw this with so many people
Mhm.
in your position. It's like you have the loyal travelers that understand what you're going through, and they're just kind of waiting for you to be ready to come back.
Yeah.
And you have also guides that are, like also loyal to you, and different employees. So while everybody was taking a hit in some ways, they were also willing to band together. For you being new into that space, what did it feel like to kind of witness that and maybe receive some of that, like that gratitude and that loyalty around your business?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great. It kept me going for sure. I needed that, and I think if I hadn't been hearing that, I would have probably not thought that there was something really meaningful, really special here to that was worth fighting for, and putting our resources and time and energy into to keep going. So yeah, I think if I hadn't seen that and seen the support of the team, the travelers, I wouldn't have wanted to. It was like there were so many challenges that that was what kept me going.
Yeah. And I know also kind of hitting that space
Mhm.
as well, that you kind of came into the business and where many people, again, like myself, could kind of maybe hunker down and reflect, or even for them, maybe it felt like a little bit of a break because you're so busy running your business all the time. You're not like looking back and seeing like what you've created and what you want to intentionally create moving forward. So I feel like a lot of people I've spoken to said this was the moment where they got to do that, but you
Mhm.
didn't really get that moment. So I'm wondering, like, do you think there were benefits to you being really headlong into that, or were there more drawbacks in that moment to not to just like being head down and like pushing to get through that period?
Yeah, I think there were benefits in that if I had been in it a long time, I probably would have just scaled it way down to make my life. I probably would have made different decisions, right? Because it was so challenging for me personally and professionally to get through it. And thinking back, I don't know if I could do it again. Wouldn't want to do it again, to be honest. I was working a lot, day and night, and a lot of weekends. And my husband had to step in and help raise our kids a lot more than I was able to be present with them. Um, but I think the benefit of it was that yeah, I was so determined to like get us going again and get things back that I just kind of I pushed myself maybe a little too hard that someone else wouldn't have done because they would have seen the opportunity there in terms of time and that it'll come back, right? But I was just in a different space where I really didn't know what that would look like, if how to do that, right? I only knew kind of how to like get things going again. That's what,
Yeah.
and that's what I could think about. I just didn't really think about anything else, right? Any other options at that point. Just I was gonna get it going again, and I was gonna figure a way through.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier too, being newer into the industry, not really knowing exactly how things worked or who to
Yeah.
connect with. How did you find community to support you and to move you through this transition? And was it just in the tourism sense, or was it also kind of growing into the role of a CEO and a business owner, which were also spaces that were new to you
Yeah.
professionally?
Yeah, I would say it was mainly just the team. I was really like just leaned on the team a lot and established kind of monthly guide meetings, was setting up meetings with our staff on a regular basis. We were talking to each other a lot. And the travelers, just really getting to know them more. But in terms, I did hit a point where I was like, this is so hard. And running a business is so hard. I felt you feel alone in leadership a lot. You want to, you want to talk to your staff, you want to be open and vulnerable, but you need to also really understand what's appropriate to share and what's not. And there's a lot of fear. You don't want to, don't want to make them worried either. And so I did look into some like business groups and ended up joining our local chapter of Vistage. It's a national organization for business owners, and that was really helpful for me. I think it gave me a place to come to where I could think about the business, think about what it takes operationally to run a successful business, that the challenges I had were not like unique to me or to my industry, that's just kind of like what it is to have a business and to have a small business. Um, and it was also interesting because I work with all women, and there were a lot of men in the group. It was a CEO group, and to see them come in and be vulnerable, and a lot of men cried in these meetings, and to know that okay, I'm not alone, and we can lean on each other a little bit to do this. And I haven't been in it since. I've joined a different group that's more industry specific, but it was really valuable for me for that year and a half to help me understand that a lot of people have been here before and there's lessons that they can share that will be really valuable for me to grow as a leader and a business owner.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned too about seeing the vulnerability of other leaders, I think that's so powerful. I know for me, I was in other spaces at that time as well. And I would think, well, of course, me just being my like one person business, of course, I'm vulnerable and emotional and I'm super attached, to a company. And I must be the only one going through this emotional roller coaster. But then you would see people who are leading large teams and large companies having that same vulnerability and that same like roller coaster. And then you were like, you felt so much pressure release, right? That you weren't the only
Yes.
person having a human experience in your
Yes.
business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it was a very humanizing time. Like, I think it was, I hope, a catalyst of understanding that people are actually in business and not
Yes.
just
Yeah.
run as kind of this robotic system, and
Yeah. Yeah.
things we experience become a part of the way a business works.
They do. Yes. Yeah.
um as kind of like leaning into that a little bit, I know something you and I have talked about is when there's just one leader or a small team, and like I said, in my case, no team, how do you find time to work on the business versus in the business? Is there a strategy that you've found that was successful, or things that you put into place to kind of find that balance? Because again, when it is a one person or small team, you are constantly looking at where the benefit is to put your energy.
Yeah, and to not burn yourself out because I was, I'd listen to podcasts every time I'd go try to get a walk or work out, and reading books at night, and and it burns yourself out. So joining Vistage helped because it holds you accountable to that time. There were monthly in-person meetings, and I chose Vistage because it was an in-person group where I could get together with people and talk. And so that was a once a month, like a half day. So I think we meet at like 7:30, and then we'd stay until after lunch. And then we would have some kind of homework we'd do together. And it was all working on the business and thinking about business challenges. So that held me accountable to working on the business and thinking, more strategically going forward. I also started to do more calendar blocking over the last few years, where I will put intentional focus time on my calendar to make sure I'm not having meetings. And even like a half day CEO day, where that's my time where I really want to try to do the things to think about the business and where we're going. I also worked with Casey Hanisco, who many of your listeners probably know. She's been in the industry for quite a while, to help me last year work on a strategic plan. So that was another way to hold me accountable to working on the business. We spent several months together where she was asking questions about, vision, mission, values, and digging into the data a bit more to drive strategy for the business. So all of those things, I think, really have helped me carve out and think bigger about what it is and what I want it to be.
Yeah. I think
Mhm.
it's really helpful for that side of the business to have that kind of accountability and community as well, because it forces you to get into that headspace and get out of like trying to manage all the smaller details or all of the constant details of travel, that you'll all of a sudden found that you've spent 8 hours doing this thing and you're like, oh, I didn't ever put my like CEO hat on today or this week. And if you don't set that aside, you kind of find yourself caught up in the wave of the things that execute all of the travel. And I, again,
Yeah.
for me, I know that's hard because I have to do both things. But I think it's so important. And then the thing that I love that you mentioned, especially in a growth phase, is you're consuming so much information. And I would do the same thing. I'd be like walking and listening to a podcast and I'd stop and then type notes in my phone and then back and, listen to a book on tape while I was making dinner. And you
Yes.
just oversaturate yourself. There's no
Yes.
way you can even discern what is good information anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And to just lean on other people who've been here before, right? And to help you. It's almost like signing up for a gym membership, right? It just kind of held me accountable to taking the time to work on the business, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so valuable to think about that. One of the things that you and I talked about that I hadn't really thought about before, but I can definitely see within the industry is thinking about working remotely and how much that has impacted, your business. We can
Mhm.
think about it in terms of other businesses in this industry or in this industry as well, but the people don't necessarily want to come back to being in person. And how do
Mhm.
you combat that? I think, especially in this industry,
Mhm.
like once travelers got the freedom of working,
Yeah.
living where they want to be or being location independent as they work.
Mhm.
um, I'd love to hear from you, like what that process has been. And I know it also adds a lot of complexity to running and operating and managing your business. So I'd love to talk about that too, because I don't have staff. I hadn't thought about this, but I think it's such a really valuable thing if people
Mhm.
are looking at offering remote opportunities to their staff, what that has meant for you.
Yeah.
Impactful.
Yeah. Well, when I took over the business, everyone was already working remotely, and they had been for quite a while. The business was based in Maryland because that's where Marian was living. So I had to reestablish it in Colorado. But at that time, there were staff in, oh gosh, Rhode Island and Michigan and excuse me. And then I had hired a few people here in Colorado. So in terms of the systems were there in some way. I did switch us over to some more streamlined systems with G Suite to facilitate remote work. But I had to build quite a bit too. There really wasn't anything in place in terms of policy or nothing, like no one had a job description or an employee handbook. And so it was pretty loose around what people were doing and when. And then what I discovered was each state has its own unique labor laws, and payroll and processing payroll in different states and workers' comp and all of those things add layers of complication. And when you're a small business, you just kind of do it all. You learn it all. There's not like an HR department to go to. I am the HR department in the payroll department. So kind of figuring that out. I did hire HR professionals to help me in that first year get a handbook in place and think about some remote work policies, get job descriptions in place for people, start to work on, performance reviews and evaluations. So we have some goal setting within each person's role. And I continue to work on that. So, it's like every year you kind of learn and do better. You know better, you do better. One of the things I did um, initially too was move us over to Gusto for payroll. And they have some tools within that help, especially when you have people in various states that help me understand, like as laws change, how to do that. But this last fall, I had the opportunity to move into an office space here in Fort Collins. So there's another tour operator here that I met. hadn't even met them in Fort Collins. I met them at Adventure Travel Trade Association events, and I said, we really should get together for lunch or something in Fort Collins, since Maria Lana Emmy is based here. So we had lunch, and they'd always been in an office, all their staff were, and then the pandemic hit, and then they switched to remote work, and then they were bringing people back into the office, and they were outgrowing it. So I said, I don't know if I'm ready for, a large office. There's only a few of us here in Fort Collins. But I would sublease a small portion. And so that was this fall we moved in, and I have to say, I've loved it. I love having a space to go to that, where I can meet with people. It energizes me to be around people, to really get to know, not only the staff with Adventures in Good Company, but the other people in the industry. We just had someone from the South Korean Tourism Board come to Fort Collins and asked to meet with us, and that was it's great to be able to have people come in and just have conversations in person. I've had like remote Zoom fatigue, probably like everyone else, and I love just being able to grab a cup of coffee or go to lunch and just have those impromptu conversations that don't happen as naturally through remote work.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And I know I miss it myself, is just having
Mhm.
the culture of an office and having
Mhm.
other people around you. Like you said, it
Mhm.
helps you focus when you're at home. It's really hard not to slip into like things that you might also need to do at home, especially if you're already stretched thin. So then you find yourself kind of like moving between things as much as you want to be focused. Other things can
Yeah.
take your attention away. So I think it's really helpful to have that space. And then also, like you said, to have another business that's similar, that
Mhm.
you can kind of
Mhm.
collaborate and work together to work through issues as well. I think I could see the real value in that.
Mhm.
When you're thinking about balancing self and business, how do you find ways to re-energize yourself and create boundaries? I think we talked a little bit before. I mentioned, kind of we are people first, which also sometimes means we're parents first. And then in this industry, like workloads vary, and then they can vary greatly if you have a staffing change that
Mhm.
all of a sudden
Mhm.
you kind of have to absorb the workload. So how do you really like how do you figure out how that flow looks, and then how do you set a boundary and be like, okay, there's all this to do, but this has to be a priority for family, or there's all this with family but work has to be a priority?
Well, I would say I'm not great at it. I'm getting better at it. So the first couple of years through the pandemic, I definitely overdid it and worked a lot. And that just to keep it was like having another child. It was like having a newborn that I had to like keep alive, you know. And I was just trying to keep them alive for those first few years. And I'm getting better at it as I over the last year or so, I've gotten better where I really do try to carve out time for myself and not wake up and immediately dive into work, which has been my habit. I was getting up very early and checking things, and a lot of it was because trips were in the field, issues kept coming up. COVID was still part of our lives for a while, and when you're in the travel industry, there are a lot of things. It's a very exciting industry some days, like a lot of things can just reservation gets missed, or a flight gets missed, or a guide can't make it at the last minute, or a guide has to leave at the last minute, or who knows what it is, you name it. There's lots of things that can happen. So because we're a small team, I was the one who was kind of on call a lot of the time for a lot of that. And so one of the ways I'm working on helping with that is just um, getting a good team together that is also excited to be here, excited about the mission, wants to be there to support our travelers, support each other. And so, building that team is so critical. I think that's one of the things I've learned is, having the team there, and giving them the tools and the resources they need to be successful in their roles. And so that I can have more space in my life and be a better leader because of it.
Yeah. I think sometimes people, when they are like lured by the magic of the industry and the idea of travel and the idea of adventure and outdoors, like you have maybe a mindset of like freedom when you enter the industry. And then you get in it and you realize that it's actually just 24/7 that things are happening and you can't really just close your doors. And I think
Mhm.
that's a huge shock in general, but especially for
Mhm.
people who are drawn to this space with the
Mhm.
idea of freedom. I don't
Yeah,
know if you've
yeah.
seen that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's kind of a romanticized view sometimes of what the job is, and oh, you get to travel a lot. And I really don't. I'm getting to a space where I can, and I'm trying to get to that space to be able to travel more. I love getting out and meeting with partners and meeting with our travelers when I have that time. But I also have two kids, which is a challenge to travel too much, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's always interesting. Like if people are like, I love travel, what part of the industry should I get into? And I was like, well, maybe not travel enough. Like
Yeah.
if you actually love tourism and like creating it, because that's one thing, right? But if you love
Yeah.
doing it,
Uh-huh.
it's ironically not often the place. And don't get
Mhm.
me wrong, like I've had really beautiful travel benefits and
Yes.
experiences.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
not that it doesn't happen, but I think that reality check for some people is sometimes quite a disconnect from what
Mhm.
they expected
Mhm.
and what they stepped into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about growth and scale. This is something I talk with a lot of people here on the podcast, especially, thinking about how big you want to grow and that the mindset around growth is usually like as big and as
Yes.
fast as possible is like the only way to be truly successful. And
Uh-huh.
again, I think maybe there's a mindset shift away from that level of growth, but you really stepped into this solid business. You
Mhm.
didn't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel in terms of what you were offering. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
how do you start to think about
Mhm.
scale and growth while keeping kind of consistency and momentum happening?
Yeah, I think, doing the strategic plan was really helpful to look at it from different angles of what does that mean to grow and scale. It's not just numbers in terms of revenue. It's also about product and what our clients, what our travelers are looking for. And then our team, the team is essential, so that I'm not experiencing repetitive burnout and staying energized by the work to be able to think big picture. Um, so the strategic plan was helpful in terms of starting to lay out the business growth in terms of different areas of business, product development, developing the team was another part of it, including our guides. And then developing the team in terms of what benefits we offer and to be a great employer. That's really one of my it's really important to me as a business owner and as a mom, and having been working most of my life, and knowing the unique challenges that women face in the workforce, to be able to provide a great place that people are coming in energized and excited. I see it now as I've been hiring over the winter, and there are so many people eager to get into this industry, and it's I love that. I love being able to see young women come out of the Masters in Tourism program and find a place to grow their careers, and to give them opportunities to get real world experience in the industry. Um, yeah, so in terms of growth, I would say slow growth is what where I'm looking right now, and my focus for this year is really on making sure that our trips are we have really good reviews, we have great ratings, and that's part of our goal, is to make sure our evaluations continue to stay high and improve. And that's including for the trips, and then for the guides to think more about the partnerships and what we're doing on our trips to build stronger, to make it a better experience, not for our travelers, but also to the places we visit. And the team, building the team up to give them opportunities to learn about the industry and grow in the industry.
Yeah. Um, and you mentioned, kind of new students coming in. There's a great master's in tourism program here in Colorado. So I think in terms of staffing,
Mhm.
it's amazing to have a
Mhm.
really well-educated workforce, because I think for a long time in tourism, I know the master's program I did was kind of a newer
Mhm.
program focusing really on tourism administration and not really and sustainability and like ethics and values in tourism,
Mhm. Mhm.
as opposed to being a travel agent, which before there kind of wasn't this space for, I guess, cultivating, and you had to learn it on the go. You
Yeah.
couldn't come
Mhm.
into it educated. You just had to like come in and figure it out.
Mhm.
So I think that's great. But how much do you think you attract other women into working with you because they're looking for mentors, or they really want to be working in a company that is surrounded by women, versus for me in most of my positions, it was like maybe one or two women and the rest were men surrounding me in this
Uh-huh.
industry.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. When I posted for two positions this fall, we had a lot of applicants, like over 100 for each position for program manager and program coordinator, and quite a few people who had been in the industry, and then others who really didn't, but were just like kind of curious about it. And then in terms of wanting to work with all women, I would say quite a few, are really interested and driven by the mission. And that's what I was looking for in hiring. Are they are they driven by the mission? Do they see themselves being here in this career and wanting to grow and asking questions and being curious about it? So I see that a lot from the interviews, but also just from students and other people in the industry, just emailing us on a regular basis. I have someone on staff who's really been leading that in terms of following up with students and meeting with them and answering questions about what we do in the industry, which has been great to, to be a resource for people.
Yeah, I think it's good because like you said, it sometimes is a hard
Mhm.
space to break into, and especially if you are very new, to just even figure out what you might like, or what different people are doing, and why one space might be a better fit for you as an
Mhm.
employee in the future, and to be able to cultivate that dialogue, that feels really special, even if you're not necessarily finding your own employees, like
Mhm.
even helping them to find a great fit is,
Mhm.
I think, something really valuable.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the overall kind of culture and where you are and where you're going, because I know that spaces for women in travel, both professionally and as travelers, is so important.
Mhm.
It's definitely something that we're fortunate to see growing and growing.
Mhm.
What do you think is unique to this space for travelers?
Mhm. Yeah, so we've kind of had a core of trips that we've offered, and there are a lot of hiking trips, multi-sport trips, uh, and we have our set of guides who've been guiding with us forever. So our own philosophies around like creating a safe space emotionally for people as well as physically for people to come and enjoy these experiences and get to know themselves, have some challenge, but it's challenge by choice. And then feel empowered out of that experience. And I love that. I think that's, really continuing to be what we'll offer and what we do. And one of the directions, though, I see us shifting is really a lot more interest in the wellness space and slower travel. So, starting to look at our trips that we already offer and that we've offered for many years, and how can we maybe be more intentional about the experience design to weave that in for people and to make it more transformational.
Yeah, I think I feel like what I've seen is that women, when they're gathering, are kind of bringing that energy to the space already right now,
Mhm.
especially. Like, I feel like people just need to heal from the past few years. And so,
Yeah. Mhm.
as women gather, I think they're like seeking that from one another. And so, then if you can kind of plant moments for that along a larger journey, like it becomes even more powerful for them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, it varies because some of our trips, they each have ratings. They are active travel. So, like level one it's more leisurely. Level five is, it's a pretty good physical challenge. And that can be, Mont Blanc or the W Trek in Patagonia, or Even here, a lot of our trips on the Appalachian Trail are pretty intense, multi-day hiking, long distances day after day. So that, how can you weave in sometimes to just give people permission to be more present in the moment and also have it be more restorative for them, even if it is a more, even if they're signing up because they want to, have that challenge. But then certainly in our wellness style trips to make sure we're that's a core part of the experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I would love to just hear from you a little bit about, like, I know you're always in the middle of things, but you don't always take a moment to really reflect, like, if there was one thing through your experience that you would want to share with other people listening, like, here's the lessons that I have learned.
Yeah.
And if you're new to the industry, new to creating a business, this is like my major takeaways of what you need to really succeed professionally and personally.
Mhm. You need a strong support system. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you're struggling, when you need help, when you know it. Um, they're there. The helpers are there. The people are there. There's a lot of people who have gone through similar experiences who can help you. Um, and and don't struggle alone for too long. Take time to reach out and um, other experiences and takeaways. Uh, still a great industry, and don't be afraid to take a leap of faith and to take a risk. I think the reward is often in the risk, as hard as it is. Just keep going.
Yeah, I agree with all those
Mhm.
all those things. And I think especially reaching out, and like you said, not
Mhm.
not I think that it's just inherent when you start a business too, to just think you have to just like forge
Mhm.
your own path and you have to
Yes.
tackle
Mhm.
everything by yourself, or otherwise you're like discrediting your own ability or something. And
Mhm.
I just don't think it needs to be that way. And there's so many great organizations, especially for women in travel, to find
Mhm.
that connection and
Yeah.
support. And
Mhm.
I also think we want to help and encourage each other. So
Mhm.
asking for people for help, you might feel like they're just going to give you the no, but I
Yeah.
don't know that that's true. I don't know in your experience if you've felt that it's
Yeah.
been a really willing exchange.
It has. I've been really, really happy to start to learn more about the people in the industry. And on that note, for you too, Christine, and appreciative of the conversations you're facilitating through this podcast. I think they've been really valuable to me, and I'm sure to many other people, many other women in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to me to hear that, because I do think it's important to share and learn from one another. And just, we never know what part of our journey is going to resonate with somebody else. And that when they hear that, it kind of gives them what they need to either solve the next challenge, or like give themselves permission for growth, or jumping at something that is exciting but scary to them in their journey. Well, before we end the conversation, I want to just give you a moment if there's anything else, that last thing that you would love to share, and then we will jump into our rapid fire ish questions to wrap up our conversation.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, let's do the rapid fire questions. I like this.
Okay, perfect. Let me get into those. The first one is, what are you reading right now?
Oh, okay. It's actually really good. It's a leadership book. It's called Leaders Eat Last. It's by Simon Sinek. And I just have really, I'm only about halfway through it right now, but it's really hitting home for me. A lot of the things that he's bringing up about team building and leading.
Yeah, thank you. What is always in your suitcase or your backpack when you're traveling?
I would have to say headphones. I have my earbuds. I like, one, I can get overstimulated, and especially in airports, it's really loud. So I'll put the earbuds in for, some noise canceling, but also I have apps like the Insight Timer app for some calming and some meditation and some breathing, just to help me chill out. And when I'm traveling to or in a new place, I'll have my headphones at night to also do, a wind down meditation.
Yeah, I have loved actually. I feel like I've seen that a lot amongst my colleagues traveling when we get to travel in groups, especially, and people like, oh yeah, I'll be ready for that, but I'm gonna like meditate first, or I need to go to my room and listen to, yeah, my mindfulness app or something. And I think it's really important,
Oh, good.
especially when you're
Mhm,
traveling,
mhm,
because while it's very exciting, like you said,
mhm.
it can be very overstimulating. And so to just realize that you you need to find those moments of quiet even when you're really excited about where you are.
Mhm.
To sojourn is to travel somewhere as if you live there for a short time. Where is someplace that you would still love to sojourn?
Mm, I'm going to have to say England. I've never been there, and we are going to London with my kids for spring break. And I've been, watching The Crown and getting into the history, listened to your podcast about unseen tours, and pretty excited to schedule that. And then a book I read a few years ago is called The Salt Path. And I'm really never been, and there's so much history and to explore there in the countryside. It just seems beautiful. The trails, the parks.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I went, but only for a very short time, for the International Women in Travel and Tourism
Yeah.
Forum last year, and I would love to spend more time because I feel like,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't even get to acknowledge like an
Yes.
ounce of what exists.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place that you've been?
Yes, I was thinking about this one. So I'd have to say octopus. When I was in Portugal last year, on the plane over, I watched the Anthony Bourdain about Lisbon, and him going out to fish for octopus, which is it's still pretty artisanal the way they do it there. It's pretty local. So when we went to a restaurant, it was one of the specials, and I got a whole octopus, which I was a little conflicted about because I also watched the documentary My Octopus Teacher, and but it was really good. And yeah, just anytime I see octopus on a menu, I think it'll not be like what I had in Portugal.
Yeah. Who was a person that inspired or encouraged you to set out and explore in the world?
I'd have to say my grandmother. She just passed away a few years ago, and I grew up with her in New Hampshire. She was a big part of my life. She was just had so much love of life and curiosity, raised 4 kids. She got her degree later in life in social work. She led tours, which I didn't even know about until I got into this industry. And she loved to come visit me. I moved out west when I was 18, and it was so exciting for her. She would hop on a plane after my grandfather died and come see me, even when I moved to Fort Collins. Thinking about this recently, she must have been in her late 70s, and she flew out here, and she just kept herself busy and entertained. When I come home from work at night, and she would just say, "Oh, I found this concert. I found this thing for us to go to tonight." And she loved to travel. She loved it. Was just so curious, love of life. So
Thank
my
you.
grandmother.
Thank you for sharing that. I try to keep a mental toll, but I definitely think grandmas have been like a
Yes.
highly influential person
Yes.
in many of
Uh-huh.
my guests'
Uh-huh.
lives. Um,
Mhm.
if you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
I have to say my mom, she moved here, she retired here about 5 years ago, which has been great because, like I said, I lived out west most of my adult life while they stayed back east. And she moved here right before I bought the business, and I've been very busy. I haven't spent a lot of like time with her. So I think it would help me just have that time with her, to get away. And she also hasn't really traveled much. So hasn't been abroad really at all. So I'd love to take a trip with her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the last question, the Soul of Travel is a space for recognizing women that inspire us in the industry. Who is someone you admire and would like to acknowledge here in this conversation?
Yeah, I mentioned her earlier. So Casey Hanisco. So she came in last year. I hired her to help with a strategic plan for the business, and I've continued to work with her since then. And I'm part of the Women Travel Leaders, and she facilitates a mastermind group. that I'm in with some other women in the industry, and really appreciate her insight, the way she leads with compassion, and the way she connects people to the industry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for mentioning both Casey, whose episode I'll link in our show notes so people can listen and hear from her, and Women Travel Leaders, which is a really great organization. And they're one of our ally organizations with the podcast. And I think such a really valuable space
Mhm.
for women working in this industry to, like I said, to have that space to just connect and really like tackle challenges as a community and individually. And so I appreciate you bringing them into the conversation. And I also appreciate you being here, Kelly. It's so fun to get to learn a little bit more about your journey with your business and to share all of your wisdom and the growth that you've experienced through the past few years. So thank you for
Yeah.
being.
Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely to be here. Appreciate you sharing stories, my story included.
Thank you.